So very briefly, I realized I had no idea what my non-negotiable values in life were.
Mm.
It's like having an operating system. I didn't have one. I had apps up here in my head. They did stuff, and I could sell it to the world through my gut, but I had no idea why.
No anchor.
No anchor at all.
Mm.
I'm generally a nice person. I'm very
Mhm.
placid. But at that time, I felt I was useless as a leader because I would be like a chameleon.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation.
And today our guest is Gary Coulton. How are you doing, Gary?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for the invitation.
You're
I'm
welcome.
looking forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, I've been following you on LinkedIn for quite a while, and I just love your perspective. I love the way that you look at things. And, I can recognise a maverick when I see one. Another willfully independent person. So, Gary, tell me, I'm interested in what amuses you. What do you find amusing?
I love puns
Really?
and surreal use of language. So, for example, I once said to my daughter, you need to cover up those bare arms. She said, I've got bear's arms. And it just makes you look from the side view at life. And that really tickles my fancy.
I love that. I do like words and what they mean. And I find that when I have clients that are English is not their first language, the words that they choose are so much better because they're much more precise than native English speakers. So I think in some respects, I think their English is better because it's more grammatically correct.
I can see where you're coming from. And clarity is everything in leadership.
Exactly. So Gary, tell us a little bit more about you.
Okay. So we're pitched here in the Maverick paradox. So I'm going to be a maverick. I am a 68-year-old work in progress. And
which means what?
Which means where once I didn't know how my internal world worked, I now do.
Right.
Where once I was close to taking my own life, I'm now the happiest that I've ever been.
Good.
And not just happy, but content. And there's a difference.
Mm.
I've always been a what I call a benign subversive. And I think that was the thing that you originally saw in some of my posts. So maybe we can talk about that later. But around 2000, something dramatic happened in my life. My father died. And he was a quiet genius. And probably 2 or 3 weeks before he died, he asked me to visit him and have a brief conversation. And during that conversation, he said to me, Gary, who do you want to come to your funeral? And what was it you did for them that would make them want to come?
Wow, powerful question.
And at the time, I was deep in redundancy from my university, and I had no idea what he meant. But gradually, I came to realize what it meant was, what's your in-the-moment legacy? So not the money you make and leave, not the name on a building, not even the publications you might author. But that moment you leave a room, what have you done for somebody else that might make them want to come to your funeral? So that's what I've tried to do all my life since then. So the brief CV is, as a kid, I was going to be a professional footballer, soccer to our American friends. That didn't happen. It was taken away from me because I broke my leg twice.
Oh.
That was a big readjustment at that age. Luckily, nature has given me a deep curiosity of everything. I'm curious about everything. And the IQ to go with it. Might sound a bit arrogant, but, I'm a reasonably bright sort of person. So I pursued an academic career, and I had an academic career as a biomedical scientist in universities for 32 years. I ran my own research team. I taught medical students. I had graduate students. I ended up Dean of Enterprise for a university. So I was working hand in hand with the researchers, some of my own research, and trying to get that out into the commercial world. I found it fascinating. And in particular, the difference in the way people thought. So here's an example. A typical scientist who really is a scientist doesn't care what the answer to their experiment is. Somebody in business already knows what they need, so has an inbuilt bias. And that, marrying those two worlds, fascinated me. I became fascinated with how my mind works, the good and the bad and the ugly, but also how, as a leader, I tried to engage in how other people thought, put myself in their shoes, the old adage. So I ended up really disillusioned with how universities are led. And in the end, I took early retirement, very early retirement, and began a company, an executive coaching company. I trained before leaving university, ran that for 8 years, and somehow became bored again. Not with the delivery, but with the getting the next client. That's very hard. But I'd got a lot of things to publish, so I started writing, and I asked a very good friend of mine about a particular book, which happened to be on this issue we're going to chat today about, called Adaptive Intelligence for Business Leaders. And he said, I love it, but nobody's going to read it. Oh, what? It's good. No, you're not telling people how you got to this. You're just giving them the pill and hoping that they'll take it. So out of that came a 170,000 word manuscript, which was my memoir. During that, it became blindingly obvious to me that I am neurodivergent. And lots of my family are also diagnosed autistic, ADHD, mixtures of both. And it kind of made sense to a lot of the things that had gone on in my life. So that's my info dump, which is my characteristic of being neurodivergent. I know I've left lots out, but we'll see how it goes.
Thank you for the share, actually. I was listening to you as you were speaking, and I'm thinking, yes, you might have done an info dump as you suggested it, but it was very ordered, and that has a lot to do with your training and your profession. So rather than just, because typically an autistic info dump is an info dump, whereas it's just all comes out as it's thought, where you have kind of parceled it up in a way that makes it easy for me and to others to understand.
The difference is, and I didn't go all the way back into my childhood, but I was known in the family as the storyteller. I told shaggy dog stories, as they're called, straight off the top of my head. So there's this creative streak that has also gone through my entire life. So my next project is a novel. So there's those two things that are balancing out one another: the scientist, the creative, and there's a lot of paradox in that.
I love that, and that takes us neatly to this adaptive intelligence. So tell us a bit about what that is, and then we can unpack it some more.
Okay, I've met 3 types of people in my life. There are the people who are, and they're often, this kind of person is often the solopreneur, therapist, that coach, that kind of thing. They're what I call heart-driven. They would do anything for anybody. But often, they couldn't organize themselves out of a wet paper bag. They don't know how to harness that emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You then have the people who are the intellectuals. And these are the people that think brilliantly, and they can plan and they can do things in their heads, but the plan is never good enough. And they're often wary about what other people might think if the plan isn't bulletproof. So they go round and round and round in circles, procrastinating. And we all know those people. And to a degree, I'm one of them. Certainly was one of them. And then we've got the people who just do dumb stuff. They're incredibly brave. You know, the kind of people I'm thinking of are those that might walk into a pub looking to pick a fight. Huge bravery, but absolutely no purpose and no plan. So this equates to the three minds that we have, and there's a lot of science behind it, and I'm not going to info dump all of that. But there is the heart mind. Now, where that exactly resides is a matter for discussion. But we're talking about the mind, which is based on the deepest emotions we have, the strongest relationships, the bonds, our non-negotiable core values, and most of all, compassion for other people. So that's the heart mind. And we ignore that very often. We don't actually understand what we stand for. What are our non-negotiables? We kind of just breeze along in life, and we can either be considered as a generally good person or a horrible person, and everything in between. So that's the heart mind. The head mind is the left and right brain thing, the creativity and analysis, and often they're considered to be at odds with each other. It's not true. It's how we're trained. We're told early on, oh, you're autistic. Okay, I'm autistic, so I'm going to stick with that. Or we're told you're really clever, so you do the clever things. And then the gut brain is really interesting because it's the most primitive, independent nervous system in evolution. Effectively, the nervous system and neurohormonal system and immunological system in our gut is the same as a jellyfish's. It's the same brain. And nature has retained it for some reason. And it isn't just to control our digestion. So it's a language even suggests that there is a gut brain, because we tell people, find some guts, get a backbone, etc. I think with language, if it's used repeatedly in songs and poetry, it's actually relating to something real. So the thought is that at least to some degree, our guts are where our self-worth and courage reside physically. Trouble is, our head mind is the one that has language, and it's loud, and it's often stupid. Yeah? And it dominates very often. So probably since that time in 2000, when I was leading people, I began to look at my own life, and I realized I was rather like a pinball, the pinball in the machine, but I wasn't in control of the flippers. Intellectually, yes, but not in life. So emotionally, I was all over the place. So I thought, how do I find some kind of foundation? And I'd been meditating for quite a long time. But in meditation, you are told to use physical anchors like your breath, the sensations of your breath in your gut, all physical stuff, in order to not block out thought, but not to pay attention to it. I couldn't do it. It drove me crazy.
I can't do those either. I can't do that either. I think it seems odd.
I have an idea for you.
Oh, right. Okay.
If you have a mind which is incredibly busy, it's coming up with ideas and thoughts every millisecond. It's really hard to try and switch that off. And that's the typical mind of somebody with ADHD or somebody who is neurodivergent. We often are just deluged. I call it my Maverick mind. Yeah. It does what it wants to do very often. So when you meditate, I can do the deep breathing and I can feel relaxed, but I have to meditate on my thoughts, allowing them to come in, celebrating them all equally while I'm meditating. And then I learned how to live what I would call a mindful life, a physically mindful life, paying attention to, I've got a cup of coffee in my hand. How heavy is it in my hand? And that buys you time from the overwhelm of thinking, particularly the not very positive, self-destructive thoughts.
So can I just ask a question? Yeah. So if you're concentrating then on, say, like the weight of the cup, I don't know if you have ADHD as well, but would an ADHD mind then focus on the cup and then forget the other stuff?
They will be distracted from it. So you can't shut down thoughts. They fight back, especially the ones that are painful.
Right.
But if you find trivial things to do, like, what does a doorknob feel like? What does the water on my shoulders feel like in the shower?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So if you're having intrusive thoughts and then you switch to thinking about something trivial, like, what does my socks feel like on my feet sort of thing?
You
start focusing on that, and then you'll be able to switch back into something else and avoid that intrusive thought. The
key thing with it is there is no good, there is no bad.
Yeah.
There's just notice and accept what you've noticed.
So that is very similar then when therapists teach that think of 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear. So it's the same concept, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Let's listen to a quick advert. As a leader, you know that having a strong level of influence is essential to achieving your goals. But how do you know if you're truly making an impact? Take the How Influential Are You scorecard to get a clear picture of your current level of influence and identify areas for improvement. With personalised recommendations and valuable strategies, you'll be able to amplify your influence and make a real difference as a leader. Don't miss this opportunity to improve your leadership skills. Take the scorecard now at amplifyyourinfluence.scoreapp.com. Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious.
So just for clarity then, are we saying that adaptive intelligence is being able to use either your head mind, your gut mind, or your heart mind at the most appropriate time? Is that what makes it adaptive?
Almost. All right. So thank you for bringing me back on track. Great interviewer. So the thing is, which order do you do these things?
Mm-hmm.
And the order turns out to be you always begin considering a new plan, a new relationship, in the end, what sandwich to buy from the heart mind, which gives you that I know who I am foundation. Yeah. With a sandwich, it might be, now, if it's beef, where's that beef come from? And you could go on a mind train. But you can just ask yourself, am I buying something sustainable? Is it good for me? Yes. Okay. But they're all based on your core values.
Yeah.
So it's heart, mind first.
Yeah.
Then you take the issue to your head. And what you find is if you practice with the trivia of life while you're learning this deep breathing, the autonomic nervous system's quieten down. Then you bring this challenge or opportunity to your head mind, still breathing in 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. The left and the right mind seem to merge. So you're creative and analytical at the same time, and you come up with an idea. What you don't do then is go, I have to make that idea perfect. Because every action we take is finally decided by what our gut tells us. So now you move your attention to your gut brain and imagine bringing this new thing, let's say with an entrepreneur, I'm just about to launch this new product. I know it's not perfect, but is it good enough? You'll get an adrenaline surge. Then the question is, can I learn, is that adrenaline excitement or is it anxiety? And that's just practice with everyday stuff. Don't wait to do this for the big stuff. So it's heart, head, gut. And if the gut tells you I'm too anxious, then you've got to go back to the heart, remind yourself who you are and why you do what you do, revisit the plan, throw it away if need be, and start again. And you end up with this virtuous cycle. And the more you do it with the trivia of life, you get used to doing it quicker and quicker and quicker. Now you start to adapt to situations. So your adaptive intelligence is utilizing those three minds in that order until your gut goes, yep, I'm ready to do this.
Okay. So here's a question then born out of my own ignorance. So I can see how that would work for a neurotypical person. And for the people that I know who are autistic, for example, the ones that suffer from high anxiety driven through autism as opposed to that anxious, if they started with the heart, and I feel, how will they know that it's not just generic anxiety and they should push through to get to the head, or whether it's actually the heart telling them not to? Do you know what I mean? I'm just...
Yeah, it's a great question.
Without experience, and obviously, like I'm thinking of a neurotypical person, you just keep practicing, and then you just know. But if the fear or the anxiety stops you, you could actually end up achieving a lot less than if you started with your head mind. Or is there... Sorry, I shouldn't be asking you multiple questions. Let me just ask you one. I'm just wondering whether, for individuals like that, would it be good to start with the head in the sense of, why do I want to do this? Then go to the heart and then back to the head, like a miniature loop, so to stop that anxiety? I'll shut up now. Too many questions.
I see what you're coming from, and I think I've got a route to a solution. I don't believe in solutions, but a route to the solution.
Okay.
I have strong autistic traits.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was I had no foundation. So all I had was emotion. And I don't have external overwhelms, and I have shutdowns. I go really cold, calm, collected. I'm the one that manages emergencies like nothing. I just deal with it. But there's a huge turmoil going on inside. And it got to the point where this was happening over the smallest thing, the slightest misunderstanding of my intentions would wreck me for days.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, I need something to be able to hang on to. So very briefly, I realized I had no idea what my non-negotiable values in life were. So I needed an it's like having an operating system. I didn't have one. I had apps up here in my head. They did stuff, and I could sell it to the world through my gut, but I had no idea why.
No anchor.
No anchor at all. I'm generally a nice person. I'm very placid. But at that time, I felt I was useless as a leader because I would be like a chameleon. Yeah. So here's how to find your core values. You go online and you put the words core values into your favorite search engine, let's say. And you ask for images and you get lists. So I have used this for my individual coaching clients in the past, for myself, and entire rooms of people from up to 3 100 people. And I've done it with every kind of cultural background, different age group, not children, but adults, different cultures, religious background, genders, it does not matter. So briefly, the idea is people walk into the room and I say, here's a list. I want you to look at the list and pick 12 things from that list that are your core values. And to cut a very long story short, after that 10 minutes, they'll come up with 12 mostly head words: achievement, success, that kind of thing, performance. They might have a few heart words like love, but usually not so many. And in a big group, if I ask them to submit their 12 words into a poll and then show them a word cloud, just about every word on that list of 150 or so is there. So there's no big words. So they're not sharing much. I then take them through a breathing exercise and finally ask them, they've got their eyes closed so they can't be distracted. I ask them to think of the most important person to them, either alive or dead, or it could be their pet. I don't care. And think compassionately about them, or feel the compassion more so. And we do that for 5 or 10 minutes. Then I ask them to go back to the list silently and pick 10 words. And then they put those into the poll and boom, the same 9 or 10 core values always come up. Not one of them is a head word. They're all heart words.
Okay.
So that means the whole room, in fact, whole of humanity, with some exceptions, pathological narcissists, for example, we share exactly the same core values: love, trust, honesty, family, respect. Fun is a good one.
And that research is shown across all
yes.
all around the world.
All around the world. The
human condition.
It's the human. So why don't we, when we're leading and being led, start from that position? And for the autistic person, what it does is it allows them, I've got a system now. I can pick honesty. And I'll look at how close to my aspiration of being honest am I day to day without judging. So you get practice on, I said I wanted a beef sandwich, but actually I wanted a chicken sandwich. So you do it on things that don't raise the same emotional temperature. And you do it again and again maybe for a month. And then you pick your next one.
Okay,
and you become obsessed with that.
So let me just jump in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is through my understanding, but I could be wrong. And one autistic person is not the same as every person.
Absolutely.
I know very much so that's true. But certainly, especially with females, it's how I think something like that exercise is probably best done with somebody who knows what they're talking about, because it can be difficult, especially if you're diagnosed much later on in life, that you've absorbed other people's expectations, other people's values, and you might end up picking somebody else's because you no longer
absolutely
know your own. So it can be a bit, as you get older, it's probably easier when you're younger because you're less likely to have masked for a long period of time and lost yourself than when you're older. And I just think my red flag would be there's a danger that you'll still end up in sort of like embedding something that still isn't true, and that could ultimately be more damaging.
But I see your point. I have unwittingly coached autistic people, autistic entrepreneurs.
You know what you're doing though, Gary, aren't you? So
yeah,
it's like the example that you give. What I'm saying is that you are facilitating that, right? So they have it in the room. Yeah. Whereas I'm just saying, if someone was at home doing it on their own, they should seek some sort of validation of response with somebody who knows them really well,
It would be a good, yes, it would be a good idea to have a coach or a family friend who takes no bullshit. But the thing is, if you experiment on things that don't matter, and you basically go, oh, that's fascinating. What made me do that? And you can unpick your masks and go, I must have learned that. That isn't me. And some people find that the value they pick isn't actually their value. And you can then put it to one side and pick another one. So but you gain autonomy by doing it. You don't. It's all about you, and it's not about anybody else and their reactions to you.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's just go back a little bit to adaptive intelligence, because I'm kind of curious about that. What I find interesting about that is the research that shows that when we think we are logically making a decision to do something, our body has already started to make those changes before the thought. So as you said, it makes sense that heart mind, because when they've tested it, we've internally made changes before we've cognitively thought about the thing. You might want that hamburger, but you've internally made all the emotions and stuff for the hamburger. So look, just to make sure I'm sure, so adaptive intelligence is the ability to flip between the three different minds in an appropriate manner and an effective way, I guess, So you're in. So you get to that point of unconscious, ability.
Completely. Yeah.
All right. So how can an organization enable their leaders to be able to activate this adaptive intelligence?
By starting at the desired end. And what I mean is, especially today with a very skeptical population, we want to be able to fall in love with somebody's service or product. It might be a little amount, but we want to be able to feel some affection for it, some connection. Especially if it's a personal service or it's a very expensive item. We want to make sure now that it's ethically sourced, et cetera, and the people who are making it aren't children in a sweatshop somewhere in the world. And that decision is a gut emotional decision. And then, as you say, we rationalize it. Mm-hmm. And we might rationalize it on the basis of our ethic, but it's a gut decision. So when we're leading an organization which is client facing, for example, we need to work out how to help people fall in love with our service or product a little more often and to a greater degree. So I'm thinking of companies like Patagonia. The people who buy from them are prepared to pay more because of who Patagonia are. And as far as humanly possible, they live according to their values, their overstated values. Other organizations, and we can think of the car emissions fiasco. What is it now? Nearly 15, 20 years ago. That was all about, we claim to be this, but actually we're a scurrilous bunch who are doing something completely different, and they got caught out. And they lost 1/3 of their market value in 24 hours. And it's taken those organizations 15 years to get somewhere close to where they were before.
Gosh.
So it's this link between the person at one end of the pipeline that you are trying to influence, and it is influence them, and the values you claim, and having a continuum between that one end of the pipeline and the other. And that is regulated by the leaders. If they are not living their lives, professionally and personally, according to those stated values, they will be caught out. We are not stupid. So it's, and you can look at the end of the pipeline as money. You know, you've had a guy on one of your podcasts who talked about what is money and its real value and legacy. What was his name? It was Rob Cook.
Mm-hmm.
And money being a symptom. Well, that money is a symptom of individual people making a little bit wiser decisions. So adaptive intelligence is my scientist's way of describing wisdom.
Okay.
So wise people, you think of all the people we look up to. First and foremost, we know what they stand for. Then they do stuff because they've thought a great plan through. And when they've done all that in one loop, they look wise. And what we're in life are looking for is to make wiser decisions a little more often.
Mm-hmm.
And life for me is a statistical game. The more wiser decisions you make, the more successful, by whatever measure you have, you will be. So if individuals can do that, you can then think of how teams do that. What are the shared values of that team? Well, they're all going to share the same 9 or 10 human values. How are they then expressed in terms of the organization's values?
Okay.
And they can hold themselves to account. If somebody then proposes something that's not according to those values, they're dragged back because it'll only bite them in the bum later if they do something wrong.
So Gary, thank you for that. So just thinking then, between those three minds, I think the heart mind is decisive. Then that's where the decision is really made. And then you've got the head mind is the cognitive stuff. The cognitive is the explanation of what my heart has told me. And then you've got the I forgot what he called us. The gut mind is the verification. So,
yes.
So we have desire, cognitive, or explanational, and then you've got the verification. And what normally happens is that we're always targeting the cognitive. So I think if you're a business or an entrepreneur, I'm guessing, is that we have to acknowledge the cognitive, but appeal to the desire and then provide verification. And then that would help provide everything that's needed for someone to apply adaptive intelligence. Did I understand that right?
Pretty much. Okay. As long as I've explained it right, of course.
So, well, it's your idea, so I guess.
If you can think of it's like an engine room. It's humming below the obvious that people see. So in an individual, it's happening inside us all the time. We work on ourselves to know what we stand for. We work on our compassion. And I've come out and said, the key to all of that is unconditional love.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that might be a subject for an entirely different podcast. But it's, I might not like you, but I don't know what's going on in your life. That's unconditional love. And I might not kowtow to what you want me to do. That's also tough, unconditional love. So once we know what we stand for, the ideas we come up with are more elegant. They're likely to be more future-proof. We're likely to bring other people in to inform our decisions rather than say, I'm right, we're doing this.
Okay.
And finally, the gut goes, the rubber stamp. I'm prepared to put my head over the barricades and run into the machine guns. That's what courage is, in effect. The trickier part is, how do you make that happen in a team of different kinds of people? And everyone, as you rightly said, is different. And then how do you integrate the behaviors of and ways those teams work into an overall organization? And that, if it's an entrepreneurial company, means that the entrepreneur has to understand themselves in that way. So self-awareness. I find it interesting that probably 50% of new businesses are launched by people who are likely to be neurodivergent, because the ideas are coming out all the time. And they can hold that together until the company gets to 5, 10, a bit, maybe even a bit bigger. But once they have to get levels and hierarchies, what drove them as an entrepreneur is not appropriate any longer to a scaling up business, unless that A system, not necessarily adaptive intelligence, but A system is embedded from the beginning in themselves to harness some of their weirder ideas that may be the ones that make a fortune, but they don't know how to take other people with them.
Gotcha.
And it may be that the attrition on companies in their first 18 months, 2 years, is because they're been launched by neurodivergent people that just can't make the next step because they have no self-awareness. Just a theory.
Thank you, Gary. And I think in terms of teams, and a lot of the work that I do is around that sort of cultural alignment, and it's they're taking the stuff that you were saying and ensuring that we have the culture that you want, and then aligning people to it. So that would be my answer to that. Gary, you have been great on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. I have enjoyed it. I would just like to be able to plug my memoir, which is the life's work that came up with adaptive intelligence. It's called Demons to Champions: How I Fell in Love with My Neurodivergent Maverick Mind. Thank you.
Fantastic. And thank you out there for tuning in to the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.